Yeah, okay, time to live free. Plenty goals I'm achieving. Some real life topics and talking financial freedom. Mindset, soul and love, everything in between. This is Freedom Podcast. Tune in, live free. Hey, got my mindset right and I got the drive. Planning one day, no more job, no more 9 to 5. Love, money, mind. Love, money, mind. This is Freedom. Tune in, cause it's going down. Woo!
Hi, this is Anna Davidson from Your Freedom Podcast, and welcome to another episode. In this episode, I'm going to be interviewing someone very special and someone very close to my heart, my dad, my father, Andrew Davidson. Now, my dad has had a huge impact on me over the years, him running his own business and entrepreneurship, as well as resilience and kindness. He, as I say, is a very open and honest, kind person with a lot of integrity, a lot of resilience. I've seen him over the years have challenges in his business with business partners and health conditions and family dramas like we all have. And I've always really been inspired by him along the way. So I'm really excited to bring you this interview. He's retired now, and he was a financial advisor for many years. And I think he's got a really good outlook, adds some real value into offering that kind of mindset to make sure that you are always sort of financially on the up curve. So big introduction to my dad, Andrew Davidson. Welcome. Okay, so hi, it's Anna, and as I said previously, I'm really excited about this interview because it's not often really that we get a chance to interview our dad. So I'm going to introduce Andrew Davidson to everybody. And yeah, he's my dad. We're just discussing whether we should mention age, but we're going to tap into his experience of his life, really, and see how, basically my dad has influenced me a lot over my years, in a positive way. And he's had a real impact to sort of inspiring me in a business way, as well as, I suppose, all the values that I have in my life, that now becoming a parent and, teaching my 2 boys the way in life. So really excited about this interview because it's a great chance to kind of find some things out that maybe I don't know about my dad. So Andrew, Dad, I don't know how to reference you in this interview. You're in your 70s now. You've had a long, healthy life, lots of different experiences that you can share. And within this podcast, Your Freedom Podcast, we're focusing on 3 things, which is love, money and mind. And everybody has different perceptions of those 3 things. And within your, I suppose, career, you spent a lot of time in kind of financial background, finances, and managing and advising other people's finances. So it'd be really good in this interview to hear maybe some shares that you can share along the way regarding to money. But before we get there, I would like to go back a few years to Andrew as a little wee chap, being brought up in Blackpool, and maybe share what your being a kid was all about, and how you got to your point of being a financial advisor, and share your experiences. So, where did you grow up? Where did Andrew Davidson all start his life?
Well, I was born in Blackpool, and in a small part of Blackpool, which was the oldest part before Blackpool really developed. It was a place called Leighton. And my parents were lower working class. I was born just after the war. And I have 4 siblings. There's 5 of us. I've got a younger brother, 5 years younger than me. And then the next one, my older brother, was 11 years older than me. And a sister who was 14 years older than me, and then another sister that was 16 years older than me. So, in actual fact, although I'm one of 5, my childhood was very much like an only child, because my elder sister was married. I don't remember ever being at home. My younger sister, the earliest recollection I have is I can't remember actually living in the house, but she actually got married when my younger brother was born. So I was 5 then. And if you think back to your memory, look back at your memory of your childhood, not many people remember much before 5. I do have 1 or 2 little glimpses of memories of when I was younger than that, probably about 2 or 3, but your real memory starts around about 5. And so when I was, my active life when I was 5, I remember spending a lot of time at home on my own, listening to the radio. I remember going to school. In those days, life was much freer than they are today in many respects, because I used to, apart from the first day of school when my mother took me, and I think probably another 2-3 days, I actually walked to school and walked back from school every day from when I was 5. And so it was, once I got used to that, I was pretty free. I always remember having a secret friend, and this secret friend was an invisible person. And this invisible person used to help me in all sorts of situations. I used to walk along and I'd see people in the road, and I had an invisible rope which my friend used to give to me. Remember, I was 5. I'm not gone mad. I wasn't a kid. I used to lasso this person and pull them along, or, and I had lots of imagination. And I never saw my brother. I can't remember my brother for many years. And as it turned out, I didn't know. I only found out relatively recently, in the last 10 or 20 years, that my older brother, 11 years older than me, was sent to my maternal grandmother to live there when I was born. Because my mother had me when she was quite old. She was in her late 30s, which, in the 40s and 50s was having a child quite late. And so she felt it was difficult to cope. So she wanted my older brother to be with her grandmother, which I thought was, when I look back now, I think was a bit cruel, a bit sad for my older brother, who was 11, who at that point in time was the only son. And in those days, it was a macho world, and boys were thought of as superior, but I don't want a son, sort of thing. And he obviously, by the time he was 10 or 11, thought he was like the king of the family. He was the young boy who's got a football. And then suddenly this person appeared, this baby appeared. And I've since found out from my older brother, who's sadly no longer with us, but he revealed a few things to me a few years ago. That he said to me, "How would you feel, that your father, you lose your father, because suddenly this person comes along and they are the center of attraction, and you're sent to your grandmother's, and you've got to live there and go to school from there and come back." And so he resented me, as it turned out, which I didn't realize, because I thought he was God. Whenever he did appear and he would be at home and he would be getting ready to go out and see his girlfriend, I just sort of hero worshipped him. But he just saw me as a nuisance and a sort of a boil on the bottom of life, as it were, And so
as a kid, then when he used to pop over or whatever, you didn't really see that much of him.
I didn't even know he was living somewhere else, because no one had ever told me. So I knew how this. Well, he appeared and I liked him, and then he was my brother, and I never really, at probably 5 or 6 or 7, think about, well, where's he living? And you don't think of those things. He just seemed to appear. And then I had these 2 older sisters who I really had gone, left the home. And then, of course, at 5, we've got this baby, my baby brother. And sad to think now, when I look back, is that I mimicked the behavior of my older brother to my younger brother. So I didn't actually feel resentment, but, the way you treat your brother is like this. And that's how I thought it was. So, all families are dysfunctional. All families, no matter how good and nice they seem, there's always a bit of dysfunctionality. But we had our fair share, because my mother was a lovely person. She was very kind and helpful and kindly and loving. My father was macho, tough, didn't show much emotion, never really showed any love. And the world was, in the 50s and 60s, it was a free sort of world. I remember going to school. I remember making my friends in the streets and roads near to me, and in the evenings, in the summer, spring, summer, late autumn, we used to go down on the field, and there's a wilderness area of it. And every night after school, we would hang around and play on this. It was called the flashings at the bottom of the road, and so there's, really, I really had in many ways a good life. It was a free life. Money and wealth didn't come into it because you think you are wealthy. We didn't. My parents were lower working class. They came from a part of Blackpool that was actually a slum, to be honest. And they worked them way up. They moved into Leighton and went into this house which they rented. And eventually they went in for buying it. And my father started his own business. And so when I came along, within a year or two of that, things were getting better for me. And so that was my life. And then later on...
So what was your dad's business? What was your dad's business?
He was in the building trade, and he was a roofing contractor. But he worked from home. So he was at home a lot during the day, working out prices and things. And he also had a bit of ill health in the latter years of his life, so he wasn't fit enough to go out on the roofs and work. But he had a gang of men who worked for him, and my older brother became his foreman on the site, and my younger brother eventually went to work for him. But I didn't, because there was some conflict there. Because my brother used to show me how to work out prices, and used to sort of help in some respects, and. But my older brother found out about this and didn't like it. He didn't like that I was sort of getting involved with the business. By then I was only about 12 or 13, but I used to have plans of houses, and I used to be measuring up and doing calculations. And one evening, my older brother came to the house. He'd got married. He lived in another house, but he came to collect the wages or something, and he saw me measuring these plans up, and he said, what the hell do you think you're doing? Because he actually didn't know how to do that. He'd never, my father had not actually shown him how to do the pricing. So, and I decided at that stage that I didn't want to get involved with this business because there was too much conflict.
Yeah.
And I was the only one who went to grammar school. Not that I thought I tried particularly hard. There was no sort of encouragement at home to be to study, or particularly, my father didn't see that as a very macho thing to sort of study, So I always remember that when I got my exam to go to the grammar school, which was an exam called the 11 plus, all my friends were getting new bikes and being, oh, you've done well. And I remember my father saying to me, oh, you're going to that grammar school? That means you'll be there a year longer than the secondary modern, and we'll have to buy uniforms and stuff for you. So it was a bit of a downer. But my mother and father were intelligent people, but they were, to be honest, they were uneducated.
Yeah.
And so
fast forward to 16, you left school.
Yes, and I always wanted to be a journalist. And I used to write poetry, and when I was a kid, and I wrote a story that we had printed in the local newspaper. And I wanted to work. I wanted to be a sort of crime reporter and discover, crimes that have been, and then put it in the newspaper and then inform the police. It was all this sort of idea of, a bit sort of imaginative, but and I did get the job. I got the job on the local newspaper as a cub reporter at 16, and I only had maths and English. That's all I needed for that. I didn't want anything else from when I was about 13 to 16. So I got this job on the local newspaper, and I had to shadow a senior journalist, and this guy was very good. He was really good. He wrote really well the stuff for the newspapers, but he was a bit of a drinker, and he liked to go to the pub every day and being there from about 11:30 to 3:00, and we'd play snooker. I was his sidekick, and we'd play snooker, and we'd be drinking pints, even though I was 16. And then he'd say, right, go to the phone. In those days, we didn't have the technology of now these days. So what you did is you hand wrote it shorthand, which I had shorthand lessons, and then I'd go to the phone and I'd ring it through to the main office in Blackpool. And the work of a journalist was very, very vulnerable. You know, if you made the odd mistake, you could easily be sacked. And so you had to get all the spelling correct, and you had to read out things, people's names, spell it to the person on the other end of the phone. And sometimes there would be situations where a name was printed incorrectly or something was incorrect, and there'd be a big storm about it, and you'd nearly be sacked. But the fact that the person at the other end didn't take it down properly was one possibility. Yeah. But also, I was shy in those days. So to be a journalist, really investigative journalist, you have to be someone who, talked a lot, talked your way into places, quite confident, asked a lot of questions. And I didn't do that. And after 6 months, I was called into the office and I was fired. And it's the only job that I was actually fired from in all my career, right? And my career, my business career was 47 years long. And it was like a game of football. It was a game of two halves. The first half of those 47 years I had 7 jobs. 7 different jobs in 20 odd years, from an average of 3 to 4 years per job. Right. But the second half of my business, of my working career, was in my own business. So that was one job, but my self-employed business.
Yeah.
I believe that when I was in business, the preparation for that and the wisdom for running business and the nows came from my experience of the first half of my business life, my working life. And I had these 7 jobs. So when I left the newspaper, what I'd done is at school is I'd taken this other exam called the Clerical Officer Civil Service exam, which was the equivalent of 4 O-levels. And I actually passed that. But I wasn't. That was just insurance in case my job at the as a journalist didn't work out, which it didn't. And so when I was fired, it just so happened it coincided with the fact that I get interviewed. It takes months in the civil service when you apply for jobs. So as soon as I left school, I'd applied, so thinking, well, I'll just turn around and say, I'm quite happy with my job as a journalist. But actually, this thing came along within a few weeks of me losing my job. And I went for the interview and I got the job as a clerical officer in National Savings, based in Lytham St Anne's. And I hated the job. And I was there about 2.5 years. And all the time I just wanted to get out of that job. And it was while I was doing that job that there was a bit of a catalyst for how I would develop and change and my confidence would grow. And that was, my earnings were quite small. I was young and I wanted a car, and I was a bit sort of not spoiled, but I just wanted, I wanted this new car. I wanted a new, which was crazy at the time. And my mother, being soft and kind and loving, encouraged me, and she said she'd help me to get this car. And what she did is she went down to the bank, and she got a loan in my name, but she backed it up. She was a stood guarantor.
Yeah.
Now she never paid any money. If I'd not done well with my loan, I would have. If I'd defaulted on it, they'd have taken the money from her. But as it was, I did keep all the payments up. But I couldn't really afford it, so I had to get a part-time job. And someone told me that there was this guy who used to work at the National Savings who left and had started his own chicken and egg business and delivered chicken and eggs freshly to people in their houses. And they said, you could get a delivery job. You could at the weekends get this job just delivering these chickens, and it's good cash money, and it's So I got the number and I rang this guy, and he said, yeah, come down and see me. So I went down with another friend who said he was interested in making a bit of money. I didn't want to go on my own. And we went down and I went to see this guy who was quite a sort of character. He was a sort of stocky, tousled hair like Elvis Presley. All his hair was all and he said, right, lads. We sat down. He says, right, I've got some bad news for you. He said, there aren't any driver's jobs. We said, no. Right. We got up. Said, oh, no, sit down, lads. I've got another option for you. So we sat down and he said, what we do need is we need canvassers. And I didn't know what he meant. I said, what do you mean canvassers? Well, he says, we need to get the orders for the chickens. So he says, what you do is we go out at night and a couple of hours every night and you go down the street, you're knocking on the doors and selling the chickens. So again, we both got ourselves thinking, no, let's sit down. You make a lot of money and it's easier than you think it is. He says, in fact, I went out last night and I did a few houses in the street and I recorded it. Look, and he got this little, at that time, it was the high tech. It was a little recorder with a microphone. And he said, I have this recorder here built under my jacket. I've got a big coat on because it's a bit cold. And I've got the microphone pinned to under my tie. And he says, basically, just listen. And he turned this thing on and he listened. He got all these sales, every knocking on the door, dogs barking, people saying, yeah, look, what do you want? And then he'd start going to his pitch. And it was an average of 90 seconds to 1.5 minutes, and he got an order. And he said, basically, you have to ask one simple question, smile, and he says a question that invokes a positive answer. And he says, for example, I just knock on the door and I say, hello, love, do you like chicken? And he says, most of them laugh. Of course we do. Why are we asking that? What's it all about? Oh, well, and then he paints this picture, this idyllic picture of these little chickens pecking up the ground on this little allotment, this little farm. And you see, we've got a place on the Moss, which is part of Blackpool, more like a sort of farmer's market type of area, small holdings. And and actually he bought in his chickens from other farmers. He didn't actually have the live chickens himself, but he painted this picture. And he says, so he says, when you buy your chicken from the supermarket, the shop, how would you like a really fresh one that we will deliver to your door? You probably have one at the weekends, Sunday roast, So he said, we deliver Friday night, Saturday morning. And the only way really is to try it out. How about trying one this weekend? And then you just go stump. You don't say a word. Don't interrupt the silence. Just wait until they. And he says, and if when you say, do you like chicken? They say, no, I don't like chicken. Just move on because you can't persuade people to like chicken if they don't like it. And he said, so that's what you do. So I actually took this job on with this friend of mine, and he lasted about 3 or 4 days, and I just carried on with it. And I ended up after about 6-9 months, he made me his sales manager. So it ended up, I started to do the interviews, and I did exactly the same thing. Say, oh, sorry, lad, bad news. There's no driving jobs at the moment, but and I just follow the same pattern. You see,
yeah. So good sales experience, though. Really good sales experience.
That's right. It's a people's thing. So that was my part-time job. So then I became even more sort of unhappy with my job in the civil service. I was more confident. My mother thought it was terrible. I'd got this wonderful job as a civil servant, and I went to work with this briefcase with my sandwiches in, and it looked as though I was really somebody. And she would tell her, "Oh, my son, my middle son, he's a civil servant." All the others were working with their hands on the roof. So I went home to her one day and I said, "I'm leaving." And oh no, you can't do that. And I said, "No, I've got this job," and I'd applied for a job. It was a thing in the newspaper about central heating. Now, going back to I'm talking now about early 60s, early to mid 60s. 90% of the homes in the UK didn't have central heating. You woke up in the morning, and in the winter you had ice on the inside on the window.
Yeah.
You had to breathe on it and rub it, and it was you had little electric fires in the room, this sort of thing. So there was this big thing about central heating. It was like a fashionable thing. Everybody was looking into it.
Yeah.
So I got this job with this company. I went to the interview, and this guy interviewed me, and he said. He asked me all these questions. I told him about the civil service, told him about the chickens and all this sort of thing. And he said at the end, he says, I really like your style. He says, I think you'd be great for it. He said, so can you start next week? And I said, well, so I've got to give a month's notice. Oh, that's no good to us. We need you next week. And I said, I couldn't do next week. I said, I could ask them if, well, 2 weeks. Could you come in 2 weeks? I said, well, okay, I'll give it a try. I'll go back to work and I'll see if I can get for 2 weeks. So I went back to work and I said, I've got enough of this job. And I didn't really have a good reputation in the civil service because I was sort of, I was a young guy and there's a few of the youngers, and I was thought of not as a troublemaker, but I didn't look that industrious that, a civil service type,
Yeah.
and so my boss said, "Oh, no problem. That's what I'll have a special word in 2 weeks' time. I think you would be better at that sort of thing than you would be with us, really." So I got his blessing to go. So I went back and I got this letter saying that I was offered £15 a week plus £5 car allowance, which was an absolute fortune. In 1964, 63, 64, I think my salary in the civil service was about, 500 a year or something like that. I don't know. And so I turned up on the Monday morning at the central heating firm in Cleveland's, and there's all these kind of people there. And I started talking to them, and it turned out there were 23 people there, and they'd all been hired to start on this job. And I got the impression that he'd actually, unless somebody was really bad, he took them on.
Yeah.
I was one of these 23. And it was similar to the chickens, except it was a bit more difficult than chicken because, you're selling a few £100s of installation of boilers and this sort of thing. And basically you were given some training on how central heating worked. But initially you were sent out with a pad and a board, and you went out to knock on doors on houses to say, we're doing a survey in the area. Because the rules on selling in those days were a lot more lax than they are today. So you say, we're conducting this survey on central heating. You've heard about the new idea of central heating in your home in the UK, and what your thoughts are on it, and we would like, we'd like to go through it with you. Now, I am not qualified myself, but I have an expert in the area a week on Tuesday, and he can come and see you and he can explain how it all works. And what he would do is he would measure up and tell you approximately what it would cost you.
Yeah.
Would you be interested? There's no commitment. And you've got lots of people that agree to yes on that. So while I was doing one side of the street, my partner from one of the lads would put with me to do the other side of the street, and he was saying the same thing. And then what would happen is that the week on Tuesday, I would be the expert that would go to see all his, and he would be the expert went to see all my leads. And we were given this calculator on rooms for measuring up BTUs and size of boilers and all this sort of thing. And so we would do the calculation, and we got a commission on. We were supposed to get one sale a week to cover our salary and the car expenses, and the second sale we got a commission on. And I was there.
I think it's interesting that, like, you went from being a journalist who you felt that you were a bit shy and maybe not confident, to then go to, obviously the civil servant job was really like your backup plan, but you then went to sell chickens door to door, and then central heating, which are really hard sales frontline jobs to do, where you can get the door slammed on your face. And actually, by throwing yourself into that, you've got to grow some kind of confidence, haven't you? Because it's quite a hard thing to do, I think, direct sales door to door.
Yeah, well, that developed in me with the chickens, because I realised that I found this power within me that I didn't know I had, and that made me change from the shy journalist. And also, while I did the chickens, I actually went on to do eggs, which was and tomatoes and potatoes. We sort of, and then at Christmas it was turkeys, and they were quite a big high price sale. So that was for a year or two, before I went into the central heating. And so,
And how did you get from the central heating into? Because I know you worked for the bank and then got into finance. How did you get from all those things?
Well, I won't go on about each job now, but basically when I left, I was with the central heating firm just over 6 months. And I was one of the most senior people there at the end of 6 or 7 months. A lot of the people who were joined on the day I joined were, within a matter of weeks, they were down to 5 or 6 of them. And then they had another inflow, another 20 odd, around 3 or 4. So there was a few of us, but I was like one of the senior ones. And the trouble is that our commission wasn't being paid. They kept coming up with some sort of mathematics that, well, really, you've got your first sale. I averaged about 2.3 sales a week, but I never really got paid for my 1.3 sales because they said, well, you've only been here. It's coming through one. It isn't definite. Hasn't gone ahead yet. It takes about 2 months to install someone, and so we've got to be a sale is when it's gone, when it's actually on the books and we've been paid. So I thought I'm never going to get this commission, and these people are all changing all the time. So I actually applied for this job as a rep for a kitchen utensil company supplying shops and stores, people like John Lewis and Harrods and people like that, and little retailers like hardware shops and selling potato peelers and gadgets and teapots and things like that. And it was a company called Thomas M. Nutbrown that was based in Blackpool. So I have that job as a and I was there about 2.5 years, travelling the northwest in Lancashire in my company car, going to see wholesalers. And then they were went into receivership, and they were taken over by a large finance company, big financial company. And so it looked as though things were a bit dodgy there. I wasn't sacked or anything, but it looked a bit. So I actually, while that was happening, I applied for another job with a company called Lucas Aerospace. Well, it was called Lucas Industrial, and they changed to Lucas Aerospace. And they made they made a lot of things for jet engines and Rolls-Royce and stuff like that. But there was this small factory in Burnley that made stainless steel hollowware, and they made teapots and coffee pots and dishes and carving dishes, as well as tanks for milk for farmers, but to store milk in, still stainless steel. And I went there as a supervisor, he wasn't an area manager, they called it a sales supervisor. And I had a number of agents, self-employed agents, who went to shops and to stores and to sell these products. And I ended up in the end, being an area manager for half of the country. And I went down to London. I have these agents, and I was there 7 years. And then we had a thing called 3-day week, and there was all the factories were closed. There were fuel cuts and emergencies, and it was called the Winter of Discontent, and all political thing in the 70s, and so one day I was at a business fair called the Gifts Fair, and on the stand, and all these retailers and wholesalers were coming to see us. And on the last day, we'd done quite well, taking a lot of orders. And on the last day, one of the directors visited from Burnley, and he said, "Oh, I want to have a word with you, lads." And he said, "We're closing the factory because of the 3-day week." He says, "Our turnover at our factory is just a little bump on the account of the whole company. It's run by accountants. We're really in the aerospace business. And some of our directors didn't even know we existed. So we're trying to save costs. So closing the factory down. But we can do your special deal on your car if you want to buy offers and all this." So on that last day of the fair, I went round a lot of the other stands of people selling a lot of giftware and stuff like that. And I went to some of the smaller companies, like one-man band, small units who were making stuff in a little workshop in Shropshire and coming and selling the stuff. And I went round to say, are you interested in having an agent, a self-employed agent? And I got 3 companies who said they would be happy with me selling their goods to shops. I had all these contacts, and they gave me samples. And I went out on the road in my car, and I went out, and for about 4 or 5 months, I was doing that. But I was finding that although I was getting the orders, and there's only one of these companies that were really paying me. The others were holding it back until, so the cash flow was difficult. So I saw an advert in the Daily Telegraph for a new company being established in Carlisle, and it was ceramic tiles, Italian ceramic tiles, and it's where these 4 tiles made one pattern, there were lots of different ones, and these were manufactured in Italy. We had nothing like it in the UK. All our tiles were very plain tiles. And so I went for this interview at a solicitor's office in Carlisle, and this guy interviewed me. He was going to be the managing director of the new company, and he took me on. And it was a development job. It was a question of going. We had Richetti, with the 4th largest ceramic tile manufacturer in the world, based in Italy. And we were going to bring the tiles from the made there, bring them in, store them in a hangar in Carlisle Airport. And then we would go out and sell them to builders merchants and to individual ceramic tilers. The problem was they had about 800 or 900 patterns of tiles, and we didn't want to stock that many. We decided we would stock about 40. And so our job was initially to go out and take samples and find out which were the best 40 tiles to stock. But also because a new young company, and we needed to get some money in to sell them as well. So I went out. There was me and another guy called Jackie, who was related to one of the other directors. I was the only sort of independent person who come in. And I had half the country, he had half the country. And it was a bit of a competition, because the weeks went by, everybody loved the tiles, everybody saw them and saw, they're great. Yes, we'll market them for you. But we don't want to take any stock. We want to see how they sell first. And we had adverts going in all the top magazines, Home and Garden, beautiful, Dia Ceramica, it was called. And in the end, I broke the ice, because I went into this place in Leyland, not very far from where I live now. And as I went in, it was a builder's merchants called Tunley's. And I went into Tunley's and I saw the branch manager, and I was talking to him about these tiles. Oh, they look really nice. He says, sorry, my managing director, Mr. Tunley, I have a meeting with him this morning. And he says, I need to see him now. So he said, come back again sometime and tell me about this. So I said, oh, right. And I said, is that Mr. Tunley up there? And he said, yes, he's coming into the meeting now. So I said, okay. I said, can I just have a quick word with him? So I rushed over and spoke to Mr. And he was an elderly guy. He was in his sort of mid to late 60s. And he was like a family company. And we got on very well. And he looked at these. And I said, look, he said, they look very nice. He said, but when he said to this other fella, Bill, who was the friend, what do you think of them? Oh, I think they're all right. But we couldn't possibly stock them. Well, I said, look, if you took an initial stock of these, what I'll promise I'll do is I will sell out for you. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, if you take a certain minimum amount, stock your shelves, I will then go to your customers. You give me a list of your other people in the area who are in the business, and I'll show them, I say, look, you don't need to stock them, these lovely tiles, but there's Tunleys have got them. Can I take an order? I'll take an order. I'll go in there and I'll sell off your shelves. Then I'll come back and I'll replenish it. You'll sign an order for the ones that have gone. So I was giving them. I said, you can have geographically the rights to this area. We sort of looked at the map. So you've got this exclusive rights to Dia Ceramica tiles. And so I had to ring the office and say, can I do this? Because, we've been 7 weeks now and we've not got an order yet. So, and they said, what's going to be the order? And I said, it's going to be, it was a lot of money then, £5,000. Okay, we'll do it. So I came back with the first order and I was like the hero. So we started to do this in different areas where we went to companies and gave them the sole rights for that area.
Yeah.
And my boss, Tommy, who he was actually the guy who interviewed me in Carlisle. He had actually worked from ICI, he'd been middle manager at ICI, and he was actually an engineer by trade. And he was interested in setting up a factory in this country and manufacturing the tiles under license from Richetti. Richetti owned 49% of Davidson. The whole idea was to produce the same tiles, but here. And he could set up a manufacturing unit. That's what he wanted to do. He was a manufacturer by trade, by his discipline. And but what happened is, as we got the success going and we got the flow of business coming through, the next thing is I was called into the office and told that Tommy was being removed. He was leaving the company because they had no intention of setting up the manufacturing unit. He'd been a bit naive. And this accountant, Stephen, who was from Carlisle, he was actually going to be the new managing director. And he was the brother-in-law of Jack, who had been taken on the same time as me, who had the other half of the country.
Right, okay.
And so they then said, we're going to appoint a new overall sales manager. And he's from one of our subsidiary companies, because this company had been formed to sell tiles, but they're actually they sold cars in the Carlisle area. It was called Dias Motors. And the same directors had set this up in England. And they said, we're having our guy, Jack Smith, who is the sales manager of the car showroom. He's going to be the sales manager, national sales manager for Dias Ceramica. So this guy was appointed over us who hadn't got a clue about what we were doing, really. He's only used to selling cars or having car sales.
Yeah, exactly.
And he was quite a nasty character, really, because he was using a bit of, threats and things like, you're not in the right place for us. I'd like you to move down to the Midlands and, go and get my car. My car's parked over there. He had the keys to my car. And he was like,
ego, however.
Yeah. And so I started to apply for other jobs again. So it was at that stage that I applied for the Trustee Savings Bank to sell financial things, because I'd become interested this last couple of years. I'd actually bought a house and the guy came to see me to give me advice on it. And I thought, I'd really like to do his job, to be an advisor to the general public,
Yeah.
Get into that, I was thinking. So when
you have quite a lot of experience going from being a journalist to then civil servant, selling the chickens and the eggs, then moving on to the central heating boilers, and then selling sort of like physical products, which I can obviously relate to with selling manufacture, well, not me manufacturing, but dealing with manufacturers and creating sort of online brands. Obviously it's all focused online now, and also very similar to some of the paths that I've taken as regards to sales rep and doing the sales rep jobs, and working for organizations. So then you're obviously interested in the finance side of things. I mean, one thing to ask you, with all these different changes, I think, because we're in a current environment, and you'll be able to, once you get into you're sort of like working for yourself and focusing on finances, we're going through a big change within the economy at the moment, and you will have lived through different sort of downturns before in the past. It'll be interesting to get your perspective on things with us currently with the coronavirus and the things that are happening. Even though we haven't gone through something like this before, you will have gone through things in the economy that have been similar. But as regards to change, because I think when you move from a different job to another job, some people are in the same job, aren't they, for sort of 30 years, 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And it can be quite difficult going through that change curve. And I think at the moment, people possibly listening to this could be going through a bit of a change curve of changing their job or moving to building something online, or just change it feels uncomfortable, doesn't it, at times? But from you you went through quite a lot of changes. I mean, a lot of the things were similar, weren't they? There were people-faced jobs where you would really selling and using negotiation skills, and the item or the subject was slightly different. So that was, you obviously worked out you were getting more confident with people, and you enjoyed that interaction with people, which I can relate to as well. So but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, these were selling sort of physical things. When I moved into the banking and insurance side, you're not selling an object. You're selling a dream. You're selling a goal for someone's financial life, their personal planning for life, which in the money side is an important factor. And and that's what financial planning is all about. But I went on to that, and I ended up going into business on my own, into financial planning, and running my own business, employing people to do that. And
how long was it you were in from the day you started at TSB? What role was it you did from the TSB? So you moved from the tile place to TSB.
Well, I was called an investment sales rep, unit trust sales rep, and I used to work in the bank. And people would come in to do a transaction at the counter. In those days, they didn't go to ATMs as much. It was all coming in and drawing at the counter, putting money in. And the staff, you tried to motivate the staff to identify people who they thought would be good prospects for you. And so, and I would train them and say to them, we'd have little sessions with the counter staff to look out for people who've got a high balance in their account. What their ages were, and then they would just lean forward and say, "Oh, Mr. Jones, while you're here, do you just have 5 minutes to spend? Because our Mr. Davidson's in the branch today, and he would like to point 1 or 2 things out to you that might be of interest." And he'd send them to the end, and there'd be a little sort of interview desk, or you go into an interview room and take them in there. And a lot of the staff did, when I first started, a lot of the staff were a bit anti because they were bank staff and they were bank people, and this salesman had come into it was a bit like mixing oil with water, and some of the branch managers didn't like the fact that there was pressure on them to help this salesman to sell. They lived in the village or the town, and they knew a lot of the people, and they were their people, and they didn't want this high pressure salesman coming in and selling the wrong product to the wrong people. So you had to gain the confidence of the manager. We were supposed to be the same level status as a manager, similar earnings, which we were roughly, but they thought we were here today, gone tomorrow sort of people, And so you had to gain the confidence of the manager, and then from the manager, the staff, and train them to look out for these people. And I was there for 7 years, and after about 3-4 years, I became what they call a group coordinator, which it wasn't an area sales manager, but it was like you have a team of sales reps, and you did it yourself, so you led by example. But every day you asked each of your reps, usually 4 to 6 people in your group, and they had to ring you up because, again, we didn't have the IT, we didn't send emails in those days, in the 70s, and they would give you their sales figures, and they'd say something like, I've made 20 approaches today, 20 approaches, and I've had 6 presentations. So they'd approached 20 people and then qualified them in the round, and then they'd gone ahead with 6 to sell them something. And I've made 4 sales. So you need those figures every day off each member, each salesman, 26, 4. And of course you could monitor, if someone was like 12, 2, 0, you knew there was a problem, So it was quite a high pressure thing, because every day you were monitoring your sales staff, and you're only as good each day as you did each day.
Yeah.
So
you were there for quite a while. Then you moved. You worked for Scottish Provident as well, didn't you?
That's right. Well, I went from that was direct sales. I was dealing with the public as TSB. When I went to Scottish Provident, I was more like the rep with the the kitchen gadget firm, that I was actually going to see the accountants and solicitors and brokers and telling them how good my product was, so they could recommend it. So I then saw the insight of being a financial advisor, what the products were and how you could help your own clients. And so that led me to leave Scottish Provident. Although I could have got promotion there, they wanted me to be a branch manager, but I just didn't feel that my future was going to be there. They were a really nice company, but I just think that they weren't going to. I was a bit into predicting what was going to happen with the economy in those days, and I didn't always get it right. But even when I was self-employed, about bank interest rates and about things, I had a good knack of second guessing what the trend was over the next 6 or 12 months, and that's why I think I was successful as a financial advisor. And in this world we live in now, as I see it, because of the pace of technology and with the population growth and with climate change and all the other things, we're living in a world now of rapid change, where people have to almost every 3 or 4 years re-educate themselves into a job. Either the existing job, which has changed so much, they've got to sort of retrain. But in a way, really, I did that in a more physical way. In my career, was I had to keep changing just because things happened in my life and in the economy, with things like the 3-day week and the crises that the UK went through. I'm not the sort of person who just jumped from one job to another, because I'm a cautious person. But in my early part of my working career, I was just thrown into these things through events happening.
Yeah.
So I got used to it, and I knew I could make a go of it.
And I think that's the thing. I think sometimes if you have been in a job for a really long period of time, and then something happens externally, whatever that be, whether it be something in the economy or just something within that internal business, people are quite shocked if they're then, well, they get stuck, don't they, because they don't know what else to do, or there's a big change. Is there anything that you think you could share from your experience of maybe like in the early part of your career of change? I suppose you did have quite a few of those changes, because how many years was it you were in finances for? You said at the beginning it was about 20 odd years, wasn't it?
Well, I set up on my own in 1984. So, and I gave up work in 2010. So that was 26 years, wasn't it?
Yeah.
26 years for about 47, 48 years. Well, from 16 to 64, 48 years. So I was 26 years in business on my own. And
when did you retire from the business?
2010. So that's 10 years ago.
10 years ago. So, and obviously you're not a practicing advisor now, so you can't be giving actual official advice. All of this is all your own opinion from a personal perspective. But if from all those different changes, and also I know that you've had, challenges like we all have along the way, with maybe business partners and different environmental things as well, within the financial industry, because I think it's got a lot tougher in that industry, just like I suppose like a lot of industries have, with bureaucracy and legalities and different things. So I know the pharmaceutical industry went that way.
Yeah.
What do you think has kept you sort of resilient in those phases of change that happen in the early days? Because it sounds to me like you were keen to throw yourself in at the deep end sometimes. And how have you sort of faced challenges that could maybe help other people listening to this?
Well, I just look at it that you've got to adapt. Other people. If somebody else can do it, why can't I do it? And I mean, all right. When I jumped from being in direct sales with ceramic tiles and Lucas Aerospace, and I went to TSB, and I started to study and take exams. And they weren't really, in those days, they weren't sort of obligatory. And then they became obligatory. But the initial exam was like a GCSE. But when I went to Scottish Providence and then I set up on my own, things were tightening up with the regulators, and I took further exams. And in the end, I took the equivalent of, they say, degree level. It was probably easier. I don't know than a degree, because I was only doing it in my spare time. It took me about 4 years to get all the parts of my exam right. So I knew what I was doing, and that gives you confidence.
Yeah.
And then also, you jump from one thing to another. Have to go from one thing to another, and other people are doing it. So if they've done it, are they better than me? I'm sure I can do it, and it's that motivation to do it.
And so, what about getting through tough times? Like, obviously now with the current environment, people are going to be hitting really tough times.
Well, the way I look at it now, this is a momentous change. Probably all the period I've been through, there is nothing been quite like it. I mean, there's been things close, but nothing quite like it. And I think if you think of the fact that we've come out of the European Union, as a country, and then there's been all these the things with the coronavirus, and now people are in isolation and their jobs. A lot of things will not go back to where they were. There'll be a lot of things that will carry on after all this is over. It'll be 3, 6, probably 12 months or so. We will have quite a different life. There will be, I mean, for one thing, these meetings now, on FaceTime and things like this, on video links, there's going to be a big jump. I mean, there's already a lot of meetings have been taking place this way, but now it's going to be the norm.
I definitely agree with that, because it was around about 10 years ago that I started getting into the digital space, and even then, people say it's getting bigger, and it's changed so much in the last 10 years online. But I think this is going to really make businesses and companies realise that they've had to do things a different way with it being online. And then when they go back, they'll be thinking, well, or when things settle, do we actually need that person to do that role, or do we need to hire that meeting space when we've actually managed for the last 3 to 6 months doing this way online? Do we need to pay for people's petrol in a business to get them? And actually, we've managed to host an hour meeting online. Let's look at ways we can improve. I definitely can see that happen, because I suppose when your back's against the wall with something and you have to do something out of being forced to do it, as a lot of businesses or a lot of people are doing right now.
And then you find it's more effective and efficient, so you move to it.
Exactly.
I think the other thing is that money. Money's been going out, cash, and people have used cards more. But now it's going to be even more so. The debit card, that's already going to increase that up now from the 35 anyway. To where you can just sort of draw cash by flashing your card and pay for things, supermarket. So that's going to be privacy has gone out the window. I mean, we've been talking about this for several years now, with the internet and with social media, the privacy, but people are being monitored now on like self-isolation and things that are going on around the country, and that's an unfortunate side of it, because I think it really reduces our freedom. But I think that will stay on. People will be monitored much more in the future than they are now. So
yeah, definitely. And I think, what's your advice? Because I keep hearing different people's opinions on, I suppose, money as a whole. And obviously, in this kind of downturn, you want to kind of be focusing, like reducing any debt and things like that, and making sure that you're not taking out unnecessary loans unless you need to be, and trying to be really cash heavy, I suppose. Rather than, like we had that discussion, was it last week? I was talking about possibly having a new kitchen and spending all that money. And actually, when I reflected after our conversation, so I do go. I do go and reflect after we have these conversations. Is I thought I don't really, because a car is another thing. I was thinking over the next 12 months, I'd like to buy a new car. And I'm thinking, why bother? I'm actually isolated. I can't actually drive anywhere. My car is perfectly fine. It's more just an ego thing. It's going to depreciate in value. So why would I bother buying a new car? Yes, I can do home repairs like painting myself and things like that. But I need to make sure that I'm focusing more on increasing my cash richness, that if I need anything as an emergency, I've got that cash to do it, rather than thinking of buying things that I don't actually really need.
Yeah.
So any advice that you think, just from going through different economic times, like the last time, it was like 2006, 2007 time on it, or 2008, coming around there. Because I always think of Blockbusters, because that was my fuel to, when Blockbusters was going downhill and Netflix was, I'd seen an article where Netflix had actually offered Blockbusters a deal, but they disregarded Netflix and was like, no, people want the physical DVD. This online thing ain't going to work. And then you see Blockbusters nosedive, and look at Netflix now. And Uber was another thing that came out of the last sort of downturn as well. That, this concept of being able to dial by the internet, call a cab and have it.
Longer term, Uber will change, will transmorgify, if you like, into. I think that cars will be used less. Individual people will not own individual cars. And it sounds very futuristic, it's many years, but I'm talking about 10 or 15 years from now, that people will, if they're doing more meetings online and things like this, I think there'll be less flights internationally as well. I think that I don't think there will be as much travel. I mean, I'm not saying it'll go back to very little, but I could see travel halving or going to 60% of what it has been.
Maybe for businesses, in some sense. I think there's a lot of people that want travel as an experience thing. They want to be in different countries for the experience, not necessarily for work and things like that. And I think internet is able to do that, though. They've got the freedom to be able to move and travel. There's a lot of solopreneurs that haven't got family, who want to just travel around and work in different beautiful destinations, and we've got the Wi-Fi. And I think, not sure that would change, because they like the freedom and be able to travel around.
I think it'll, I won't say being forced on people, but I think that with virtual reality, people will be so, if you want to go to a nice deserted island beach or whatever, they will be given, they will go into virtual reality and things like that. And it may be that they only go once, really, in 3 years. I think there's going to be some very, very big changes that we don't even comprehend at the moment.
Yeah, possibly.
And because this moving around again is like this isn't the only virus that will ever happen this way. With more and more population, we're going to get, and because we can identify now these viruses, it's not like with Spanish flu in 1918. Now we can identify these things happening. So, another 18 months, 2 years, there'll be something else. It may be worse. It may be not as bad. Yeah. And I think there will be ways of living. And we'll say we want to restrict movement, not entirely, but to a greater extent. I think we don't realise how free a time we've been having over recent years, and that may never be the same again. I hope I'm wrong, but to see it as
I know what you're saying. I definitely think there's going to be, this is bigger than people perceive, and people talk about when it goes back, and I think nothing ever goes back. When I look on all my experiences, good and bad, nothing ever goes back. We move forward with different changes, but obviously there's peaks and troughs of drama, I suppose, and then it kind of settles. But we evolve and change, don't we? So it won't be a case of going back. It'll just be, we'll have a new way, really. Yeah. So, we've chatted. Most of my interviews have been about an hour. I reckon me and you could probably chat for another hour. what I would like to touch on before we sort of round things up is obviously we the Freedom Podcast talks about love, money, and mind. We spent a lot of time talking about your career, really, and you shared some really interesting stories. What about love and mindsets then? So when I talk about love, I mean sort of self-care, self-love. You and Mum have had how many years have you been married? I know I should know. It's a long time anyway. You were in your, how long?
52 years.
52 years. Any advice on having a good companionship and good marriage?
I don't like to offer advice because, I mean, the only thing I would say is the one thing I've learned is a work in progress thing is self-awareness.
Yeah.
And it's so important that we should work at being self-aware and not feel that we've achieved it. We've never achieved it. It's a lifetime scope to marginally all the time adjust until we're even more, look back after 3 years, say, oh, I'm much more self-aware than I was 3 years ago, even though you were pretty self-aware then. So self-awareness is very important, because when you're very much self-aware and you know your weaknesses and you know your strengths, not necessarily that you can put all your weaknesses right, but you can be aware of them and you can make up for them a little bit. But you then also recognize more things in other people because of your own self-awareness. And the other thing that we all have values, and human beings have obsessions. I've come down to the fact that every human being has his or her obsession, and you only need to read a book by an author and then read some further books by the same author, and you find the same thing rearing its head again. And my values and obsessions are, apart from being self-aware, I want to meet more people.
Yeah.
I want to make more connections with people. I want to find, and I've always been like this, and it grows more and more. It'll something, again, I think I'll have until the end of my life, is that I want to find with every new person that I meet something to love about them. Even though sometimes initially you think, oh, it's a bit of a desert, there's not a lot of scope here. There's always something in everybody that you can find to love about them. It's a little bit special and unique. And so, and just in the same way that you can meet someone and initially think, fantastic person, everything about them I love, but then after a while you detect, there's that thing that's not quite right, that thing that's not quite right. So it's meeting more people and connecting with them. And the other thing that I have, which is again is a bit of an obsession, underlying obsession, is to seek the truth. To seek the truth. Now, a lot of people shy away from that because they say, "Oh, you can't really concentrate on the truth because it would upset. If you're going to tell the truth, the basic truth to people, it's going to upset them." But I'm not saying
it's how you tell it, though, isn't it?
You've got to be diplomatic, but also, some people aren't bothered about the truth. Some people you meet want to use the situation to get their way. And to do that, I'm not saying they'll lie, but there'll be things that they won't tell you, which is the same thing. So, and really the truth quite often is not detectable. It doesn't exist. Actually, the truth in a certain situation, you cannot find it. It will be impossible to find it. But the main thing is that you seek it, that you try. And I find that the people I get on best with in the end are people who also have truth as a fairly high principle themselves. Yeah. They are also, it's actually looking for truth with like-minded people. You don't always find it, but it's the process of seeking it that matters.
Yeah.
And, that answers some of the things about love. Love is...
Yeah, and within love, it's all, for me, it's about self-love, or more importantly, self-care. And I've seen over the years that you have changed, like, your health, really. Because when you were sort of younger, you probably I don't know, maybe drank more, not saying that you drank heavily, but you probably drank more, ate more unhealthy foods. Yes, you've always sort of done your running, you've always enjoyed your running from my perspective. I've seen you do that. But you got into health a lot more, I think, because you knew that you had health that, or maybe bad health that ran through the family with your dad, possibly. So is there anything you want to share on that side of things?
I think that when you're younger, you don't really see health or self-care as important because you actually don't believe it's going to happen to you. You believe you believe you're immortal, really. Bad things in health and people dying and people being debilitated in some way is something that happens to other people. But then when you get to about 40, you starts to dawn on you that perhaps that's not absolutely true. And that one or two of your friends around you get a bad condition. You might even have someone that you went to school who you've heard has died at 41 or something, And so you suddenly realise, well, not suddenly, but you come to the conclusion that perhaps you ought to do something about your health and lead a life where some people are more concerned about their car than topping up the water in the radiator, checking the battery levels, than they are about themselves. So so why should why not drink more water if it's good for you? Why not drink eat certain foods that are going to be good for your digestive system? Because I think if you look at illness and people dying in the end, a lot of it is looking after your digestive system.
Yeah.
And
what have you found that's worked for you?
And it's like physical self-awareness. Well, knowing the right having a balanced diet, having lots of different types of foods. Because the other thing is that once you get over 55, it's been shown that your digestion, you don't actually, the nutrients and the vitamins, you're not as efficient. Your body's not as efficient at extracting those and sending them around your body. So a lot of the food that you eat, you end up excreting a lot of the vitamins and things. So you've really got to have twice as many to make sure you have enough stays on in your body.
Yeah.
That's a simple way of putting it. But so an exercise, if you don't use it, you lose it. It's a bit like someone's gate to their house, and you've been to see someone, I'm sure, and it's a very nice item. You get another gate, and suddenly you've got to push it hard. It's sort of fallen off its hinges or something, and it's if you don't use that gate, it will just seize up and not work anymore. And so me doing my running, which is like slow jogging these days, slow to fast jogging. I'm not really running that fast, but it's just using those muscles to make sure that they're still there. So I can actually do things. I can, you might say to me, oh, it's a good idea to put your feet up against the wall, your legs up against the wall and spend 10 minutes doing it. There's a lot of people my age would be frightened to get down on the floor to put their legs up against the wall.
Yeah.
So it's being able to do things that natural things, I mean, some people will get in the car to drive around the corner to go to the shop. Well, if it's a quarter of an hour's walk for me, I'd rather walk. I've got the time because I'm not working. But sometimes people make excuses of time. I'm the busiest person ever, so I've got to use my car. I've got to do this. So it's.
So final thoughts then around sort of what's kept you resilient, because I know that listening to you today, it sounds you've had a good life in the last 70 odd years that you've been on this planet, but I know that you've also had challenges and tough times which we haven't really talked about. But what would you say, because obviously there's always things that are around the corner that you've got to deal with. People have health conditions that they worry about. There's things happening in their business or in their career. bereavement, and you've had all of those things happen. What do you think has kept you, I suppose, strong, or what would you like to share about how you got through the tough times? What has helped you get through the tough times?
Well, your health will never stay, wonderful. Life is up and down, and you have to have the downs to appreciate the ups. But really, running your life or living your life is a little bit like managing a business. You go into a situation, you see the risks, you see the down, that could happen. And so you can't avoid all the risks. You can't have complete safety and protection. But what you can do is go along and say, well, I'll do this. And then if that happens, I know I can do this, So that's not going to avoid death. You can be knocked down by a car, you could get cancer, and, it could be a particularly vicious one, you could die. But it's a question of just sort of shadow boxing a little bit and getting your way through the swamp, as it were.
Yeah.
And you've just got to use all the time. You've got to be aware, really, of what could happen. And I don't believe in worrying, because worrying is all it does is fogs the mind, and you can't think clearly. And all you've got to say is a lot of people worries are things that are going to happen, but they haven't happened yet. So if you can't do anything about them, don't worry, because something could just crop up that surprises you, and you don't have that problem. It avoids that problem anyway. Money worries, people have a lot of worries people are about money, and a lot of that just is based on a little bit like when you were talking about the kitchen. It's a bit like, you've got to cut your cloth. You've got to decide what you can afford now. The people who have worries is they earn, $1,000 a week, but their lifestyle is spending £1,001 a week. Okay, so all they need to do is to change about £2 a week, and they'll be earning 1,000 and spending 99. No worries.
There you go.
That's all. All you've got to do is look. And I always say to people, sit down, and it's a bit boring, but when you've got halfway through, you find it's so interesting, things that you're discovering. Either you sit down and just go through what, over the last few months, you've been spending on certain headings like food, house, repairs to the house, car, petrol, and break them down. How much for your holidays, and break them down and see how much per month, if you like, monthly, that's costing. And then look at what you're earning, what's coming in. And then you say, and then what you can do is each one of those things is you've got to give them a title. So like food would be an essential, because you can't do without food. So if it's, over the week, if it's £85, food, essential. But if it's cigarettes, or if it's wine, or if it's clothes, often it's not essential. It may be
luxuries.
Sorry?
Luxuries, really.
Yeah, the luxuries, but you could say, things that you'd really like. They're not essential, but I forget the term now. There is a term for it. And then there are things that are, non-essentials. So you've really got three tiers: the essentials, the non-essentials at the bottom, and then the middle ones, the ones you'd really like to have, but you can do. If you really push, you can do without.
Yeah.
You can always squeeze those to fit in with your income.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they go through that process, see how much they waste, really.
Yeah.
Because we've all had it where I've had like tougher times where I know that I can, live off pasta and rice, and cook for very cheap, low cost. And there's other times where I'll go to, Waitrose or Marks Spencer's, and I know I'm paying double for things, and it's because I want to treat myself and have luxuries. But there, you can actually reduce your expenditure, and also just like getting new quotes for things like certain home insurance or car insurance, or things like gas and electric and all those kind of things. Do you know what I mean? You can really do. It's good to do that on an annual basis, or at least every couple of years to check what you're paying for stuff. Because every time I've done it, I've saved money. But I think you're right. I think we don't realise what we spend maybe on a daily or weekly basis that is not really a necessity. So if people are going through really tough times,
the real thing is desirables. There's essentials, desirables.
yeah.
But they're not essential. And then there's the things that you can give up. But the other thing is that what we tend to do these days is, because we often want to spoil ourselves and have the best. You know, you go to the pub or to the restaurant, and you look at the menu and you look at the most expensive thing on the menu and you go, oh, that's good. But why? There's some people that are choosing that nearly all the time. Or they're going for the wine, and they'll go for the expensive wine all the time. The trouble is it's never a treat. It's become what you have to have.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know, it's better to sort of, you know, have that day in the week where you just have a glass of water, and another day where you just have the cheap wine at £4 or £5 a bottle, and then you have the day where, have a £25 bottle.
Yeah, exactly.
But and although you could afford it more, you know, don't, because you've got to have a treat. To have a treat, it's got to be something you don't do regularly.
Yeah, exactly. And I think wherever you're at, you can have those treats. Like you say, if you're not worried financially, then the treats are becoming a bit of a norm. People who are really worried will really understand that level of things that are a treat, because I know I've gone through things like that anyway, where you really do value the things. I think, God, I can't believe I was buying this before so freely. And now, you know, and then it changes again, but it makes you value those things, I think, when you go through that. It's a good, even though it's tough, it's actually good for you, because you realise the value in things, and you're just going to make sure it doesn't slip again.
Yeah. And that's why, you know,
Habits.
Sorry?
We have habits, that's the thing.
Yeah. And sometimes it's nice to, not at the moment because of social distancing, but sometimes it's nice not to go on the car, but to go on the bus. And you go on the bus and there's other people on the bus who you see their way of life. That's what they do more often.
I don't know if I'm convinced about the bus. I could do the train, but I think I'm a bit of a snob when it comes to the bus, I've got to admit. I think I'd take the boys on it, but I just, every time I've been on the bus, I think it's a horrible experience. I'd prefer to walk.
More people like me or you went on.
I like the train. Recently, I went and got the train into Birmingham instead of driving, even though I worked out that actually there wasn't that much different in cost, really, because when I parked at the train station, it saved me a bit of petrol. But it was actually quite nice just to relax and kind of, you know, go on the train for the day. But then, of course, we had all this social distancing stuff now, and, you know, I don't want to be in public transport. But, yeah, I think it's just some interesting reflections that I think people right about now will be looking at within themselves. This can be like a wake-up call to reinvent themselves if they've suddenly lost their job, or even if they haven't lost a job and, you know, the government supported them, it can still give them a wake-up call maybe to do something different, maybe build a business alongside something. Or they might have always realised that they've got a skill or a service that they want to offer people. Or they might just want to write a book. You know, it might not be a monetary thing. There might just be a goal they've got to write a book or do a YouTube channel, or, you know, connect with people on the digital world, I suppose. So, yeah, to conclude then, really, obviously I said to you at the beginning, this is your freedom podcast, and we talked about all these 3 different areas, but what does freedom mean to you?
Well, in many respects, we're not as free as we were in the earlier part of my life, you know, and that will never come back in that way. But I think one of the things to be free is to be contrary, to do when everybody else is doing one thing, you do the other. Don't be fashionable. It's like buying investments. When everybody's selling them, you buy them. When everybody's buying them, you sell them. And that one I seem to be freedom, but it's not going along with what there's social pressures which take our freedom away if we follow them slavishly. And I think be your own person and just do, what you want to do. The problem is that free will, a lot of people believe that there is such a thing as free will. And we'd all like to think that. But actually, modern science has brought up some pretty sobering evidence in recent times that actually human beings don't have free will. We're made from our conditioning from when we were born. Our subconscious comes up with little things jump into our minds. We think, that must be free will. But it isn't. It's all prejudiced or biased things that we have been planted there from when we were born. Yeah. And all you can do is feel that you can do whatever you want to do. But are you doing whatever you want to do, or are you doing what your conditioning has told you to do?
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. And that is a good point to end, actually, because I think it's food for thought for people. Because, again, society pressures as well, that pressurizes people to think that they need to be doing or living their life in a certain way. And I think social media exacerbates that, really, that people are perceived to have this perfect life, and it gives you the pressure that you have to live your life in a certain way. So I think that's good advice of not following the crowd or the faddy thing that everybody thinks that we should be doing. Actually, be free in your own mind to do what you need to do.
Yeah, and I think that people, do what they, should just do what they want to do. But we are conditioned. We have these prejudices, these biases, and something else, but I forgot what I was going to say.
Okay, so let's leave on that note then. So let's not feel conditioned and think about what you really, really want to do. I think that's a good note to leave it on. So thank you ever so much for your time while you're self-isolated and you're maybe not running around or going on the bus right now, but I really appreciate your time. Been a fab interview. I've learned some things that I didn't know, so really appreciate it. So thanks for everybody listening, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Hey, thank you for listening. Hope you had a blast. Here to elevate your life. It's the Freedom Podcast. Love, money, mind. Love, money, mind. Wanna see you all win. Wanna see you all shine. Just make sure that you subscribe. Bringing good vibes. Join the Facebook group. Now it's time to change your life. Hope you come back. Right now is the chance. This is an experience. It's the Freedom Podcast. Hey.